I'm Erwin Raphael McManus, and this is the Genius of Podcast. Today I have as my guest Lewis Howes, the founder of the School of Greatness. Lewis is a high performance business coach. He was a professional athlete. He has an incredible story, and he has also interviewed over 1,500 of the greatest minds in the world. He told me that two of his greatest interviews were Kobe Bryant and me. Lewis and I are great friends, and I am so intrigued by the way he knows how to ask the kinds of questions that open up a person's story. So join me as we begin to dive into the genius of Lewis Howes. I've been waiting for a long time, Lewis, to have you in any environment to have a conversation like this. I'm so excited to have you on the Genius of.
Thank you.
And I know it sounds kind of uncomfortable to be called a genius, but you're not calling yourself a genius. I'm calling you a genius.
I appreciate it.
And I'm really excited just for people to learn so much about you, because one of the things you do is you bring people on to the School of Greatness, and you have an incredible ability of pulling out greatness in people, pulling out their insights, their genius, their their contribution to the world. But you don't really let people do that to you.
Right.
And, so you're always guarded with the questions. And today I want to take the questions away from you and ask you to kind of like let us into your own story, into what makes you you.
For sure.
So there's some people who maybe are meeting you for the first time. I know so much of the different moments in your life, but I want you to kind of take us to the beginning. Tell us a little bit where you grew up, what it was like growing up, and what are some of your more vivid memories of what developed you as a person?
Well, my vivid memories were not necessarily positive because some of my first memories were me being sexually abused by a man I didn't know, and then spending almost every weekend in a prison visiting my brother. So when I was 5, I was sexually abused, and then by a man that I didn't know. Then when I was 8 until I was 12, my brother was sentenced to prison for selling drugs to an undercover cop. And so we would spend the weekends, going to the prison to see my brother. There was like visiting times and things like that. So we would go there. I would sit in a room of probably 100 people, families, and convicts. And that was where I spent my Saturday or Sundays from an early age. And so it was, I remember just a lot of kind of tension and stress within the family dynamics growing up. I was the youngest of 4. I felt alone a lot. I felt like alone because we just had a lot of challenges we were going through, and we were trying to kind of just survive emotionally. So for me, I was always observing people. I was observing my parents, I was observing my older siblings, I was observing people in the prison. I was just kind of watching people. And I wanted to know why people did the things they did and the difference between right and wrong. And I made a lot of mistakes growing up as well. But I think those early memories really started to like shape me and figuring out like what I want to be, how can I overcome these challenges? And it made me seek answers. It made me seek wisdom to figure out how do I overcome the challenges I was facing, my family was facing, and really to find happiness. I was trying to figure out how to feel loved, how to like myself, how to love myself. And I didn't know how to do that. And so I used sports as a tool to gain, I guess, acceptance, to fit in, to belong, to be accepted, because I just didn't feel like I had any friends from an early age. When my brother went to prison, I wasn't really allowed to hang out with the neighborhood kids because no one else was going to prison. So it was like from a small town in Ohio.
Well, you're from the Midwest.
Yeah, small town in Ohio. And it was challenging because I wanted to hang out with with the kids in the neighborhood, but I wasn't allowed to for a few years. So I had a lot of anger, and I used sports as a tool to make myself bigger, faster, stronger, to try to win at all costs so that I could be seen as valuable, because I didn't feel valuable in myself inside. So I tried to seek kind of this external validation to find value. But it didn't work internally. No matter how much success I had externally, I still felt unfulfilled, unlovable, and I didn't like myself. So I wasn't sure. I had this as I started to grow in high school and college and my 20s, professional sports, and accomplish things, and then building a business and making money, I still felt like this inner lack of confidence. I had external confidence, but internal, I don't know if it's like
sense of insignificance.
Yeah, sense of insignificance. I felt like I was an imposter. I felt like I was still unworthy of love on the inside, and I didn't know how to find it. I didn't know how to create it, how to shift it. But I knew there was something that was calling me since I was 5. I could always remember this pole from right here. This pole was like, you're supposed to be creating something more. You're supposed to be helping people. You're supposed to be serving. You're supposed to overcome these challenges. But I didn't know what it was specifically. I was just kept being pulled to become more, to learn more, to develop myself, to really dive into my fears. Something you talked about in church this last week with the end of fear. You were just like, the only way to end fear is really to dive into love. And that's the opposite of fear. You were talking about that. And I started to really dive into, how do I love myself? Because I was externally diving into things, but I wasn't internally diving into my own inner world. And once I started to do that at around 30 years old, everything started to shift for me. I started to have a different viewpoint of the world. I started to love myself and love others differently. I started to shed more of my ego and be more compassionate, things like that. So it's been an amazing journey to finding peace, but I feel very grateful now in this part of my life.
Well, before we get to this part of the story, 30 and forward,
yes,
there are, I think, a couple of things that really stand out to me about your developmental years, your growing up years, because one, being from the Midwest, you'd expect almost like a wholesome story.
Yes.
It's supposed to be the,
yes,
mid-America, great family, great environment, nothing but love and peace and community, and your story begins right away with a lot of pain. And if I remember correctly, you had a learning disability.
Absolutely,
growing up.
yeah.
And I think it was even up to the 8th grade, you were really struggling with learning how to read.
Yeah,
Tell me a little bit about that.
all through college. I had a tutor from when I went to I transferred schools in the 8th grade, went to a private boarding school, and when I went there, they tested everyone that came into the school, and I had a 2nd grade reading level. So they were like, do we put Lewis back, a couple grades, or do we just give him a tutor and have him special classes? So they gave me a tutor every single day. So during recess and lunchtime, I went to go read with a tutor from my 8th grade all the way to the end of my senior year. And I almost flunked out of English in my senior year in high school. And the teacher was really on me. She was like, listen, if you don't pass English senior year, you can't go into college.
Okay, wait a minute. You went from 1st to 8th grade without anyone realizing you only had a 2nd grade reading level.
I was in a public school at the time, so I guess no one was really checking those things.
And you passed.
I was also in special needs classes up until then.
Okay.
Yeah. And somehow I passed.
Right, because it tells me, see, this is a different perspective on that.
Yes.
It tells me that you are incredibly creative.
I was extremely creative. Creative in the sense that I was cheating a lot.
Right, no, because
I found a way around it to get past.
It takes a level of ingenuity.
Yeah, exactly.
to keep moving forward.
It didn't have a lot of integrity, but I was creative.
Well, I was trying to give it a good spin.
Exactly.
and was that a result of of a reading disability? Was it a result of emotional trauma, do you think?
I have no idea. I just knew that when I would read, a sentence, it was hard for me to read it in succession. It was hard to read it all at once without mixing the words up. And then if I'd read a page, I couldn't remember what I read. So I wasn't able to comprehend things. I wasn't doing well on comprehension tests. And so I would read a page over and over again, and somehow my mind wasn't comprehending what I was reading.
Which is amazing that now you're the author of this incredible book, The School of Greatness.
Yes.
And you wrote The Mask of Masculinity.
Yep.
And you're a best-selling author.
Yeah.
And who would have ever guessed that
It's
this
crazy.
kid that couldn't read
It's crazy.
is being read by people all over the world?
It's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. And I'm very grateful for the development and being persistent and working on it. But I just remember feeling like there was no hope. For a long time, I was like, why am I even trying? Because the more I try, the harder it is. I'm not remembering this. It's exhausting. It hurts my brain. And I was just like, I just want to go outside and play sports. Why am I even trying this? It just felt like every time I was with a tutor, it was painful. It felt like I wasn't improving at all. And it was just a matter of, how do I get through this so that I can pass, so that I can go play sports? That was kind of the whole.
All right, so let me be superficial for a minute.
Yes.
All right, you're a great athlete.
Yeah.
How tall are you?
6'4".
6'4"?
Yes.
How much you weigh?
230 right now.
230.
Yeah.
No, that you say right now.
Yeah.
You look great. No. And you played football.
Yep.
You actually played arena football.
Yep.
Which is pretty awesome.
It's fun.
Was that in Alabama or?
I was in Alabama. Yeah, I'm in Columbus, Ohio for a little bit.
So what position did you play?
Receiver.
Okay. Tight end or wide receiver?
Wide receiver.
So you're fast.
It's fast enough.
Fast enough.
But I had vision.
Okay.
That was the thing I had. I had vision, and I hardly ever dropped the ball. So I knew I was never as fast as the fastest receiver. And I said to myself, what are some other things I can do to have an advantage? One thing was I could work on my mindset, I could work on my preparation, and I could eliminate things that other people do. And people at the time in high school and college and the pro level, a lot of them were going out and partying and drinking and smoking or doing these things. And so I said when I went to college, I was like, I'm not gonna have one sip of alcohol. I'm not gonna do any drugs. I'm gonna go to bed early, I'm gonna wake up early and do the things I need to do to be prepared. So I eliminated things that a lot of people were doing. And I think I met one other kid who didn't smoke or drink, my entire 5 years in college. And so it took me longer to finish college, by the way, too. So I said, what are the other things that I can lean into? Vision was one of the things that I always had. I could always see things on the field or on the court. I just knew where it was gonna be. I knew where the ball was going to be. I knew where the person was going to throw it to. I knew where the defenders were going to be. So I really practiced seeing things before they could happen. And that's what allowed me as a slower player to be able to make big plays and at different levels of different sports that I played. That was one of the things that I've always been good at. And I think it's because from an early age, I observed people, I'd watch people. I would just sit and watch.
So who are your favorite receivers?
Jerry Rice was a good one for me early on, but there's a lot of great receivers now.
But there was a receiver, I think his name was Fred Bilishnikov with the Raiders, and he sounds like he played a lot of what you're describing. He wasn't bigger or faster, more talented. He just was able to find open spaces.
Absolutely.
He seemed to have a spatial intelligence that other people didn't have.
Right.
It's very much like Bresky.
Yes.
He seemed to have
know where the puck's going to be.
Yeah, he had an intuition. He was able to outsmart people who are more talented than him.
Well, I think when you know you're not as talented as someone else, you got to find a different angle. And I knew that early on. I was like, I'm not able to jump as high or run as fast, or I'm not as strong as everyone else. Even my teammates on a smaller team, I was just like, the guys at a pro level are so talented. And from a small town here, there were guys better than me. I was like, in order to get to the next level, I need to create something that most people don't have. And or that I can step into, and that was really vision, also just relationship building, teamwork, the intangibles that I feel like people want you to be around them. So I really learned at an early age, or I guess in my high school and college years, okay, what makes people tick? What do people want? And how do they want? What will make sure that they want to have me on their team? If I'm not the best, how can they want to have me on their team so I have the opportunity to make an impact? And that was really through relationships. And I knew that coming from a small school, that the only way for me to go pro was through relationships. So I would reach out to all the different scouts, all the different coaches. I would show up to where they were going for tryouts, and I would take them out to coffee or lunch and build relationships. So I said if they could like me, then they might be willing to give me a shot. And because I knew I wasn't going to be the best in the field, but maybe they would like me and give me an opportunity, more tryouts. And that's what I really leaned into. And it's kind of what I've done in the podcast world, is just building great relationships so that people like and trust and feel like they're vulnerable enough to kind of share things that they normally wouldn't share, which hopefully helps the show and helps impact more people.
Well, it makes sense to me because you're incredibly likable.
Thank you.
And from the first moment I met you, I felt like I'd known you for so long and felt this almost instantaneous friendship that emerged.
Was the first time I met you literally the day you came on the show?
That's it. When I came on the School of Greatness.
It's amazing.
That was the first time we didn't know each other. I didn't even know what you looked like.
It's an amazing interview.
And it was one of the most enjoyable things I've ever done.
That's cool.
It was really beautiful.
It was fun.
Yeah. All right, so going back to this, because I'm hearing two sides of this. One is you optimized the ability you had, even though you recognized it was limited.
Yes.
But a lot of people have more talent, but they don't optimize for talent.
Now.
And you optimize it with really unromantic things like not drinking, going to bed early, you know, and having personal discipline, which a lot of times people want to figure out, how do I go around those to achieve greatness? But the other thing is, you actually developed a relational intelligence.
Yes.
So really, you don't think about, oh, his athletic achievements are really connected to relational intelligence. A lot of athletes seem to not spend as much time developing that level of intelligence.
Well, I think as a receiver, I needed to know that the quarterback wanted to throw me the ball. In order to have an opportunity to have good game film, that I could show it to scouts in college, I was like, I need the quarterback to want to always throw it to me, to think I'm always open, and to know that he can trust me, that I'm always going to catch the ball. So one, I had to be talented enough so that I was ready and prepared for when the opportunity came my way, when they threw me a pass. I needed to have the skills to catch every ball. I needed to know that he could trust when he called a play, I knew where I was going. And so I developed a relationship in the summer with my quarterbacks where I was just hounding them. Hey, let's go throw. I'm going to catch for you. Anytime you want to practice, I'm available. So I was always available in the summers so that I could be a receiver for them so they could practice. And then I would just build that relationship and just throughout the year, hang out with them and say, hey, whatever you need. I was always a helping hand off the field. And I think when it came to on the field, if someone feels like this person's always had my back, this person cares about me succeeding, this person, shows up on time, does these things, of course I'm going to throw them the ball. And when the moment matters, I'm going to throw them the ball. And I think that's what you need to develop for yourself. When the moments matter in life, are you getting the opportunities from the people in your life? Are they calling you because they think about you, because you've shown up for them consistently over the months and years? And I think that's what I've tried to do the best.
It's so good.
And you've got to be, it's hard to find the opportunities if you're not in the room with the people with the opportunities. And when the opportunities come for them. And that may be 5 years down the line, it may be in 6 months. And so I'm always about building the relationships, just because you never know when someone's going to throw you the ball. So you got to be ready to catch it. You got to be good enough to catch the ball and make a move and score. But you got to be building relationships all the time.
Yeah, and the distance between the quarterback and the receiver, it looks like it's only crossed by the football, but it's not. It's crossed by the relationship you built with that person, the trust that's there.
Yes, absolutely.
And you went to arena football, but I know your aspirations had to be the NFL.
Absolutely, yeah.
I worked for years with the NFL, and one of the tragic statistics is about 75% of all pro football players, 2 years after they've retired, are either bankrupt, drug addicted, divorced, or dead.
Yeah, suicidal, yeah.
And I think for every athlete who gives everything they have to success, when that success comes to an end or when it doesn't happen at the level that you want, it can really lead to depression.
Absolutely.
How was it for you when you came to the realization that this is as far as this goes?
Well, I got injured. I broke my wrist playing arena football, and I was in denial. I thought I was going to be able to come back, but I was in a cast for about 6 months. And then it took another year of just kind of like the rehab process, and I realized, okay, I'm getting older and older, and I wasn't good enough in the first place to make the NFL. Maybe I was on the cusp, but 2 years removed now from playing, it's really hard to come back. So I was on my sister's couch for about 1.5 years in that transition period, really in a state of just sadness. I don't know if you call it depression, but just constantly sad because my identity was tied to being an athlete.
And how old were you then?
23, 24.
Wow.
Yeah, so my whole mission as a kid was to be a professional athlete. And so when your identity is tied to something and then that's taken away, for me, it was challenging. I didn't have the tools on how to emotionally deal with that type of failure or loss or grief. I just didn't have the tools at that age. And it's one of the reasons why around that time, I started using LinkedIn to connect with business leaders, sports executives, and inspiring people in the community. And I started interviewing them back when I was 23, 24, 25, using LinkedIn as a tool to connect with them and see if they would jump on the phone or meet me for lunch. And I started asking them, how did you deal with failure? How did you deal with success? How did you deal with this, the heartbreak, all these things? And I fell in love with asking questions from people. And that's why every time I'm with you, I always ask you, what's the meaning of life? Why are we here? I always ask you these questions. And that process, that journey of asking questions and observing gave me those tools to practice and integrate during that time. And so it was a powerful lesson of just dealing with, okay, I've got no money, I've got no place to live except for my sister's couch right now. My dreams are gone, my identity is shattered. What do I do now? And it was hard. And so I could relate to people feeling lost, feeling sad, feeling depressed, feeling like, what's my purpose now? Mm-hmm. And I was lucky enough to channel that into finding a new purpose, as opposed to just sitting there for another 2 or 3 years. I started to channel it. I said, okay, this is an opportunity for me to overcome my fears. I went into public speaking classes every week, joined Toastmasters, because I knew that if I wanted to be something greater than my current situation, I needed to overcome my fears. And the only way for me to overcome the fear is to go all in on it. So I did that with public speaking. I did that with salsa dancing, because I was so amazed by salsa dancers, but terrified to go on the dance floor. So I started obsessing and going all in there, and really learning about business, which I knew nothing about. So I started finding mentors to teach me about business, started practicing that. And those kind of 3 things over those couple of years helped me figure out, like, I'm not sure exactly what I want to do. Let me try a bunch of different things and go all in on them and see what opens up for me. And that was a powerful demonstration to step into. To not just sit there in the sadness, but actually act on it after a period of time.
All right, so you're 23, 24, going through a midlife crisis.
Yeah, quarter life crisis. Yeah.
Quarter life crisis. And you decide to start connecting and learning. How old were you when you moved to LA?
I was about 30. Yeah.
30?
Yeah. 29. Yeah, I think about 10 years ago almost.
And did you start the School of Greatness before you moved here or after?
After.
All right, so talk to me a little bit about that, because that's really been one of the huge arenas where you've made a mark and creating incredible conversations and giving people access to so much learning and insight.
Yeah. I was in New York City pursuing another dream, which was to play with the USA national team for handball.
Tell me about that.
So
How did you get to playing handball?
During this time on my sister's couch in 2008, I was still in my cast, or maybe I was just got the cast off. I can't remember, but it was right at the end of that period. I was watching the Olympics in Beijing, 2008. And one night during the 2 weeks of the Olympics, at like 3 a.m., I saw highlights for team handball. And it was the first time I ever saw this sport. And I was mesmerized. I was like, what is this sport? This is the sport I was made to play. And so I started researching everything I could to find about team handball in the USA, and there's pretty much no information. I mean, there's a few club teams around the country, but it wasn't a professional sport here. It's bigger in Europe and in South America. And I said to myself, when I make enough money, I'm going to move to New York City, because they had the national championship club team. And I said, I'm going to go learn from those guys. I'm going to go make the USA national team, and I'm going to go to the Olympics. I was like, I had a new dream in sports.
Wow.
A year and a half later, I started making enough money in kind of my business journey that I moved to New York City. I showed up at practice. I had no clue. I didn't know how to get in contact with anyone on the team, but they had a website with the address for where they practiced twice a week. So I showed up and I told them exactly that. I said, hi, my name's Lewis House. I just moved from Ohio. My dream is to learn handball, make the USA national team, and then go to the Olympics. And they all laughed at me. They all laughed at me. And I said, I'm here to learn. I'll do whatever you guys tell me to do. 9 months passes. I get a call. I make the USA national team. I play in Argentina in the Pan Am Championships. This is in 2011, I think it was. And then I played for the last 8-9 years with them. So I've played all over the world, from Spain to the UK to Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Mexico, Canada. And we haven't qualified for the Olympics, but it's been a fun journey just pursuing that dream as well.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So good.
But after a year and a half of living in New York City, I moved to LA for a girl that I was dating. And
always the best reason to move to a city, right?
Exactly. I told myself I would never move for a girl, and the day I moved, she broke up with me.
That is the story I hear all the time. That is the recurring narrative.
Right, exactly. And we were kind of up and down for the next 6 months, back together, breaking up, that type of thing. And my life was amazing in New York City. And then the first year when I was in LA, I hated it. I hated LA. The relationship was up and down. Other business relationships were not working out well. And all of it stemmed back to me being the common denominator. I was the one that was in all these bad situations, right? Yeah. But I didn't see it that way. I thought it was everyone else's fault. And I remember driving in LA traffic one time, stuck, trying to go 2 miles, and I was stuck for 30 or 40 minutes. And I just felt like everything in my life felt stuck. I was stuck in traffic. This relationship was so up and down for months. A business partnership was up and down. I just felt stuck. And I remember stopped on the highway and looked at the cars around me, and everyone else seemed upset. Everyone looked angry. And I was like, man, there are a lot of people that feel upset and stuck in their life too. It's not just me. And I said to myself in that moment, I go, there's got to be a way that I could help people, reach people who are commuting, who are stuck, that maybe are stuck in their life as well, are frustrated in relationships like I was, or in their career like I was. Like all these breakdowns were happening. And I had this idea. This was in 2012. So I had this idea because podcasting was starting to come out from a few of my friends, launched a show, but no one even knew how to like download it on their phone at that time. No one knew what a podcast really was, but I heard a few friends that launched one. And I remember calling a friend who had a podcast in the car saying, what's it like? Are you enjoying it? Is it impactful? Do you think this has legs? And he was like, this is one of the most fun things that I do every week. My audience loves it. I love it. I think it's going to be successful. And for whatever reason, in that moment, I said, I'm going to do a podcast. And I came up with the name, the School of Greatness, because I was like, I wish there was a school growing up that could teach me how to overcome failure, how to deal with stuff when I'm stuck, how to deal with like why I beat myself up internally, how to manage my relationship with my girlfriend that's so up and down right now. I don't know what I'm doing. I wish I had tools to navigate this. And really, how can I learn from the greatest minds in the world about how they accomplish the things they do? I said, I wish there was a school that taught me how to deal with failure, that taught me how to get back up, and taught me how to just deal with my inner world. I wish there was like a school of like greatness. And I was just like, that's it. And so that stuckness allowed me to also see things that I wanted to create. It was that feeling of frustration, anger, resentment, just not things progressing. I was like, okay, where do I want to be? This is what I want. I want the School of Greatness for my life. So what do I need to do to go get it? And that was the start of it. That was the idea. And then I just said, okay, let me take action. First interview was a guy named Robert Greene, who's an author of a number of popular books, one called Mastery, one called The Art of Seduction, another called The 48 Laws of Power. And it was an inspiring interview, yeah.
I think you mentioned to me that maybe your highlight interview was Kobe Bryant.
Kobe Bryant is my favorite. Even before he passed, I was like, this is my favorite interview. Because
of course, aside from like mine.
Besides yours, yes. Yours was great too. I loved ours. Yeah, but Kobe just made an impact on me from his energy, like when I met him right before the interview, to after the interview, to the way he just revealed himself in the interview. I just felt like I really respected him and admired him even more after sitting with him. His energy was infectious, and I was just like, I really appreciated it. So for me, it was inspiring.
And what year did you start the School of Greatness?
2013, January 2013 it came out. Yeah.
And you've done how many interviews now?
Over 1,400 or 1,500 right now.
So you've done nearly 1,500 or so interviews.
Yes.
What would be for you like 2 or 3 of the takeaways, not that you've shared with others, but that have stuck to you? Because you've had a lot of information come through your system.
Yes, a lot.
And I imagine that 90% of it, you're just basically channeling to other people. But there's got to be some things along the way that like connected to you.
I try to take one thing from every interview and see like, okay, is this confirming something I'm already doing, or is this something I need to add or something to eliminate? I'm going to go back to the basics, that the health of your mindset, the health of your emotions, and the health of your body, the temple that we have. This is the only tool we have for the rest of our life. Just keeping your health in high standards is going to give us more clarity, more energy, and more ability to love people, as opposed to being frustrated and upset. So really taking care of health is something that I've done with a lot of different scientists and doctors and nutritionists and top athletes and business leaders who talk about health as wealth. So figuring out a process and a formula that works for you to optimize your mental health, your emotional health, your spiritual health, and your physical health. For me, that's really important. And there's a lot to all that, but making that the number one priority of your life is huge. So whatever that looks like for you, making sure your health is at a high standard, because that's the foundation for everything you want to create.
Mm-hmm. That seems to lead to some of your own concepts around grounding. Mm-hmm. And talk to us a little bit about this concept and how did it form in your mind, and give us kind of a breakdown of how we can be grounded.
Yeah, I think there's physical grounding and there's mental grounding. And every day I try to ground myself first thing in the morning, and also ground myself before I go to bed. I try to ground myself before I came here. I'm always trying to do mental grounding, which is preparing myself, saying, what do I want to create in this next moment? How do I want to show up for this person I'm about to see? How do I want to show up for this workout? How do I want to show up for my interview? Whatever it might be, how do I want to show up for my team meeting? And so it could be a moment of grounding, it could be minutes, it could be a process for 10 minutes, it could be anything you want to create for yourself, but a mental grounding that's really just setting an intention of how do I want to show up? What do I want to make this, why do I want to make this moment matter? And what's the intention behind this moment that I want to create for this other person or for myself? So it's a process that you do for yourself mentally before you get into a situation. I like physical groundings as well, which for me is just really making sure, before I do anything big, I really try to physically ground myself. I try to stretch, I try to loosen up, I try to expand myself. And for me, that allows me to just reset, because the moment before, the hour before, whatever, the day before, we might be holding on to something. So I try to let it go, reset mentally and physically to be prepared for that moment.
It's interesting. When I was traveling years ago, I was doing this tour in smaller arenas of like 15, 20,000 people, and they can feel overwhelming.
Smaller?
No.
20,000 small?
They're, mid-sized stadiums.
Exactly.
And
it's pretty big to me.
They're pretty good size. And but I would say two words to myself before I speak. This matters.
Yes, it does.
Because
even if it was 2 people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? 200 people.
But what I would find is that in those situations, they were so overwhelming that I could actually finish my talk and never be present. And especially when you're going on a tour, because you're doing a very similar talk each time. And so it can actually just become rote. And I looked back a few times and I realized only at the end that I didn't really recognize the moment. I wasn't present. And other people may have felt it was, a meaningful moment for them, but I realized that I was the one who missed the moment.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so I began just a small process. One, it was a very extroverted group of people, so they always wanted to hang around and talk before I spoke. And I'd have to say to them, hey, I can either be with you in this moment or I can be with them in the next moment, but I need this moment.
Absolutely.
And then I would just walk around and I would just tell myself, this matters. And it's about being grounded. It's about realizing this moment matters. It has significance and it can have a huge weight in people's lives.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes I can be so frantic and running so fast and moving so quickly that I look back and I realize I wasn't really present for any one of these conversations. I wasn't really present for working out. When I used to go to the gym and when Equinox existed more. And I would see people and they're all texting. They're not present. And I'm going, are you really getting the workout that you need while you're here? And my wife, I've been married almost 38 years. And if I pick up my phone, she just gets up and walks away. And it's just her way of going, look, I might as well not be here if you're not here.
Right.
And a huge part, I think, of the battle is really being present. And I actually love the way you've talked about having intention in every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
When you're doing an interview, because you are a master of interviews, and do you have any internal ritual or process you take to make sure that you're present when you're having a conversation with someone?
Yeah, well, first thing is just eliminate all distractions. So it's just, clean space, everything out of my pockets so that I'm not, no distractions for phone or anything like that. I think preparation is key. It's really being prepared so that I feel like I can be present as opposed to, what am I supposed to say? So it's really preparing, just like I did in sports. It was always be prepared. So when the ball comes your way, you're ready. So when someone shows up, like Kobe, I got the Kobe interview the night before.
Wow.
Someone had called me on my team and said, do you want to interview Kobe? And I said, yes. And they said, well, he's available next month, like this day and time. but he's got this new podcast out that just launched this week, and he wants to get more promotion around it. And I said, because his publicist has called someone on my team, and so my team member called me. I said, call the publicist back and tell him we'll do it first thing in the morning tomorrow. I'll go wherever he's at in his office. I'll go anywhere. First thing tomorrow morning. Do not hang up until you get the confirmation that we're doing it first thing in the morning. Because if we book it in a month, he's going to cancel it. Something's going to come up, like we have no idea if it's going to happen or not. I just know these things, people are busy, and he's going to cancel it, or something's going to come up. So do not hang up until they confirm first thing in the morning. This was probably 5 o'clock the day before. And they call me back like 20 minutes later. They say, okay, 8 a.m., Orange County, his office, here's the details. And I was like, good. And I remember like preparing all the next morning on the drive there. I had my videographer. I said, tell me everything about Kobe Bryant. Like we're listening to like 2 episodes on the way there. I'm getting all the downloads from his whole history. But I felt like we were there a few hours early, and I felt prepared because I was just spending that time doing that information. But you got to be ready. You know, even when it calls for the next morning, I had to be ready and prepared. The next thing I do is I really think to myself, who is listening to this? Who's going to be viewing this, watching this? Who's listening? What do they need? What do they need in this moment? What are they going to need in 3 to 5 years from now when they watch this? Because I try to keep it evergreen. And I think, what is someone struggling with that only this person could give them the answer to, or that they could really relate to from this person? So I think about that. And I also ask every guest, I say, what would make this the most powerful interview you've ever done? So I try to ground them as well. So I try to ground myself about getting clear on who needs this, what they could help them with, and then I try to ground them so they become present. Because a lot of times, my guests' interviews aren't present unless I also ground. I can't expect them to come grounded and ready when they're on a press tour, when they're just going through the motions. So how do you get other people grounded? And I think that's important, because that's where the magic happens, when both parties are present. If one person's present and the other one's distracted, it's not as good. So it's my responsibility and duty to get that out of someone else. So I asked them, what would make this the most powerful interview you've ever done? Then they usually say, oh, okay. You see them actually get grounded. Right. They're like, oh, we're about to go there. Okay, well, what if you ask about this and this and this? So they're telling me what will make this powerful. Then I say, my mission is to make this the most powerful interview you've ever done, and that we impact millions of lives around the world so they improve the quality of their life. Is that something you're open to? And then they're like, okay, now I'm focused. This is his intention, so I'm gonna show up to make sure I give my best as well. I did that with Kobe. I said, is there anything off limits? Because his press team was like, gave me sheets of things that I can't ask. And I go, I've got, I saw the things that I can't ask you. Is there anything else that you don't want me to talk about? And he said, ask me anything you want and take as long as you want. Because I was only supposed to have 20 minutes, but he gave me like 40. His press team was still telling me to wrap it up, but he gave me like 45 minutes. And I told him, my intention is to make this the most powerful interview you've ever done. And I know you've done thousands of them. So what will we need to do? And he was like, just do your thing. Ask me anything you want. And I was like, great. And he opened up and shared things that he'd never shared before. But he was prepared. I mean, he was actually there at his office before I got there. And I got there at like 6 a.m., 2 hours before. And he was already in his office. No one else was in the office. The assistant let me in. Kobe was in a dark room by himself, looking up and visualizing. And I walked by his office, and I was like, Kobe's in there. What's he doing? And the assistant was like, he's already been here for an hour. He was up at 4 a.m. with his daughter working out in the gym, and then he came here before everyone else. I go, this guy's got 5 NBA championships, an Oscar he'd won at that time. He doesn't need to be here 2 hours. He could roll in right before, and he's Kobe Bryant, But that left an imprint. He was already grounded. He came in ready to go. I didn't need to do that, but by, I think, adding to that, it made it even more powerful effect.
That must have been just an incredible experience.
It was amazing.
And it just really, for me, reinforces that probably our best learning isn't what someone says, but who someone is.
Absolutely.
And I think we underestimate the power of being in someone's presence.
Yes.
When they have found their intention in life. which kind of maybe leads me a little bit to this next question, because you've been on quite a journey in your life, and you've done a lot of things really, really well. But if you had to identify, like, what is like that secret sauce, that unique genius that makes Lewis Howes, that you bring to everything. People may see it differently in different arenas, but you're bringing the same you into all these different arenas. How would you identify that genius? What do you think is what that carries you each day?
I would say two things. A vision that I have for myself and for other people. I feel like I see the masterpiece in people, and so I try to speak into the vision of what I know they could create, and I try to help them. The second thing is I try to help them actually create it faster than they could do it themselves. So I want people to be, when they're around me or when they experience me in person, I want them to feel better off after I'm gone, and I want to support them accomplish their greatest dreams faster. And I want them to smile. And I want them to smile. I want them to feel a good hug. I feel like I give some of the longest hugs. That's part of my secret sauce. And
you do give very long hugs, and
I try to give awkward long hugs. But I feel like people have lost. I mean, especially during now, it's hard to do that. But I want people to feel loved in my presence, whether that's through a hug, whether that's through looking in their eyes and just listening to them, whether that's smiling and having a joke, and really asking them about what they want to create in their life, and then supporting them to getting there.
And you said you help people move to becoming their masterpiece faster.
Yes.
Have you seen some particular things that on a recurring pattern keep people from moving toward their own personal masterpiece?
That hold them back?
Yeah, that hold them back.
A lot of it is just self-doubt. I think self-doubt is the killer of dreams. And so learning how to fully love and accept ourselves and trust the timing and the process of our life. But I doubted myself a lot when I was younger, and I still accomplished a lot. But accomplishing a lot and doubting myself left me feeling very unfulfilled, and I still didn't love myself. So I could accomplish but not feel fulfilled and feel a lack of inner peace. And I think when you have the peace and the inner love for yourself, and you can be on the pursuit of your genius and bringing that genius to life, that's the ultimate experience, in my opinion. Then you feel like you're in flow every day.
Now, you're around geniuses all the time. And where would you be on the spectrum of there's genius inside of everyone, or genius is very rare and it's only in a few?
What's your definition of genius?
Well, you give me one.
I haven't thought about my definition of genius, but just what comes to mind is a unique ability, a uniqueness, a unique ability. And I think everyone is unique by their nature, and so therefore everyone is a genius because there's only one. There's only one of that thing, that person. And each person has a different way of thinking, a different way of living and breathing and experiencing life and perceiving the world, so that each person has genius in them. I think it can be cultivated more and developed more, and some people develop it over others. But I believe that all of us we are genius because we're here. So for me, that would be my interpretation.
No, I love that. I love that. You have the School of Greatness, and if there's a parallel narrative, it would be the School of Greatness. Because you not only interview people who've done something great, but you're also trying to inspire greatness in other people.
Yeah.
And I think that you live with a life conviction that everyone can express an aspect of greatness in their life. And I think the challenge is when you compare yourself to other people.
Yeah.
You may think, I'll never do anything great because I'm not going to be Kobe Bryant, or I'm not going to be Bobby Fischer, I'm not going to be Tiger Woods, whatever. And I think that's a part of the dark side of it is you're never going to feel you've accomplished something meaningful if you're always comparing yourself to someone else. And I think the same thing with genius. And we recognize unique geniuses when we see Picasso, or we see Mozart or Einstein or Hawkins, wherever it may be, right? And I think there are like athletic geniuses like Steph Curry and LeBron and Michael Jordan and Kobe and even when you're describing about the ability to have vision, it's an aspect of genius that people don't oftentimes recognize. But I've wondered so many times in my life how many people have such unique genius in them, but failure and disappointment or a sense of insignificance or the lack of affirmation in their life has kind of covered their genius under the rubble of all of that discouragement. And I think one of the things that both you and I have in common is we kind of believe there's gold inside of everyone.
Absolutely.
But a lot of people have given up excavating for that gold inside of themselves. And so sometimes they just need a little help to realize that there's more in them than they could ever imagine or ever know.
Yes.
If someone's listening right now and they would go, Lewis, I really need your help finding that masterpiece inside of me, where would you tell them to begin? How would you tell them to start?
I'd say start with your biggest shame and insecurity and make a list or speak it into existence of what that is for you. The moment I started to talk about and share my shames, all the things that I thought, if people knew this about me, no one would love me. Lean into those things. Because those are the things that were holding me back by being afraid to talk about these things. Your talk about fear recently was a really powerful reminder for me, because all the things that I was afraid of, when I finally went all in on them and went through them, as opposed to holding on to them and not allowing people to see it, but for me to face it and go through each one of my insecurities. So write a list of your biggest insecurities and then say, okay, why is this holding me back? Why do I feel insecure? And what's the thing that's going to allow me to go through this, to face it, so that it doesn't have power over me anymore? And so I really thought about, man, if people knew that I was sexually abused, no one would love me. No one would like me. And so I never shared it for 25 years. If people knew that I was, always insecure when I was reading aloud, they would always make fun of me, because they did that when I was a kid. They made fun of me. So how do I hide this from other people so they can't make fun of me? How do I not read in front of others? I just said, I'm going to face it. I'm going to be practicing it, and I'm going to stumble in front of others to face it. I'm going to keep doing this as opposed to hiding it. When I started to do that, I realized, okay, this isn't so bad. Like, I'm still alive. My friends still like me. People love me. Like, it's okay.
They may even love you more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When I started to reveal my shame, I was like, my life is over. Everything, once people know this, like, no one's going to talk to me. And in fact, it was the opposite. Everyone wanted to learn more from me. Everyone wanted to be around me more. They trusted me more. They felt like, wow, you're being real. You're being vulnerable. I trust you. And that became a superpower. That became a genius for me, being vulnerable. And I didn't think that was possible. I was like, no, as a guy, you got to be tough. You got to be strong. You got to hide these things. You can't reveal these things to people. But really became a part of, I guess, my genius, where I was able to connect with guests. When I had them on, I led with vulnerability, and I revealed my insecurities, my fears, my pains, my shames, and then so did they. And it gave them permission to do the same. And then people listening or watching benefited from seeing that the greatest in the world deal with shame and insecurity. And it allowed them to make steps towards their own greatness as well. So that's what I would say. Write down a list of all the things you're most afraid of and insecure of. Write a fear list. If you want to become fearless, you've got to overcome your fear list. So write them down and start diving in one at a time.
I find that so many times when people are paralyzed by fear, one of the compensating emotions is anger.
Yeah. Oh man, that was my life. Angry at a lot of things.
Yeah, and I think some of it is because when you're in pain, the pain is so deep that anger kind of numbs you. It makes you feel as if you're powerful, but it's actually an expression of powerlessness.
It is.
And
being afraid.
Yeah, right. And everyone that I've ever known that expresses anger, I know, is actually hiding great fear. How did you deal with the anger? How did you work your way through that? Because I have a hard time imagining you as an angry person, because you're so kind and so centered.
Yes. I was always very loving and kind and happy. But when I was triggered emotionally to one of my insecurities, then I would react. I would get defensive. I would get guarded. I would lash out, or whatever it might be, and then I'd go back to being happy. But it was. I remember, that had power over me. The anger had power over me because I didn't know how to control it. It wasn't like I was doing horrible things, but I was reactive and defensive, and I didn't know how to manage that. I got over it through going to a number of emotional intelligence workshops, doing therapy, It's just pretty much trying anything because I knew that there was this pain inside of me that I was trying to let go of. And in an emotional intelligence workshop, I went through many kind of exercises that allowed me to finally get the courage to open up about sexual trauma, where I'd never talked about before. That was kind of like the opening of everything else. Once I opened up about the thing that I was most afraid of and did it consistently with friends and family members over a period of a year, it started to open me up about everything else. And I started to feel like, okay, well, let me share about all my stuff to my friends, my family, my therapists. And that process went me down the path of finding and rediscovering the peace that was inside of me and not holding on to that pain. So that was what worked for me.
Well, I think there's so many people who struggle with the very, very same tension of fear and anger, a sense of powerlessness, and the pendulum of your best self being a part of you and also the worst self being a part of you, and trying to figure out which self is actually going to end up having control over your life. And I think one of the great challenges is because we live in the middle of cancel culture and Me Too culture, and we live in a culture where we get defined by our worst moments. And by the way, it's one of the things that always really drew me to Jesus was that is this promise that you're not defined by your worst moments. That in fact, in a more beautiful way, you're defined by the best expressions of who you are as a human being. And a huge part of my own life journey has been to help people have moments where they see their best selves.
Yes.
I used to just talk to people about 5 minutes of greatness. Like I said, look, just remember or think about 5 minutes where you've been your best self. And if you could be that person for 5 minutes, you can grow that.
Absolutely. Make it 10 minutes, make it 30 minutes.
And just keep expanding that. In your journey, I know there are different people that you've been inspired within the athletic field, but have there been geniuses or people that you've interviewed in the School of Greatness that have been inspirations to you? Who are the geniuses that maybe have informed or inspired you?
I think, people that have overcome some type of extreme adversity and come out joyful and grateful, to me, that's genius, because it's extremely hard to overcome. I think of, Amy Purdy, who lost both of her legs when she was 18 and then went on to be a Paralympic, medalist in the Olympics, went on to be on Dancing with the Stars, went on to write books and do talks with Oprah all around the world. Someone who's overcome some of the worst challenges and come out happy, joyful, and making an impact on others. I think that's also a level of genius. So people like that, I'm really fascinated by all the spiritual leaders that come on like yourself, who bring peace and understanding to things that seem hard to understand. I think that's a level of genius, because I think we all come to this world with questions, and some questions don't seem to have logical answers. And people like yourself try to create some type of sense with the senseless, I guess, or with the illogical. And I find that's always powerful. And I really like the neuroscientists that come on and are talking about how the brain, I'm fascinated with the brain and how the mind are connected, and how where consciousness is at. And how can we understand all this together, and how does our body connect with our brain, connect to our mind, to consciousness? To me, that's fascinating. So people that study that and find the science behind that, I think are geniuses as well, because that's got to be hard to study.
All that to me is so fascinating, and which I think why we resonate so much together. And a part of what inspired me to start this podcast is writing the book, The Genius of Jesus, and just asking an objective question in the journey: does Jesus even qualify as a genius? And if a person was just looking at him without the stories of the miraculous, just looking at him as a human personality. And one of the things that really struck me was the way Jesus elevated empathy. And in the book, I actually write that I think empathy is the highest form of intelligence.
Yes.
That once we can see life through the experience of another human being, it actually expands our ability to have insight, to have wisdom, to make the world a better place. And I think that one of the things that has really inspired me about you, Lewis, is that you don't just interview people. It seems like you actually care about the people you talk to.
Absolutely.
That and I can say this from my own personal experience. I came in as a stranger, I walked out as a friend.
Yes.
I walked in not knowing anything about you, but even as you were asking me questions, I felt like I was coming to know you. And I think it's a rare gift to be able to bring a person. You don't just bring a person into the room, you bring a person into your life and into your soul. And I just wanted to just tell you how much I appreciate you and how extraordinary I think you are as a human being. And I genuinely, without any reservation, have seen such genius in you.
Thank you.
And I almost hate ending this conversation because I think there's so much more inside of you. But is there a question I haven't asked you that I should ask you? Is there
the question? The question is, why do I think Jesus is a genius? That you should ask me.
Louis, why do you think Jesus is a genius?
I think, based on what you were talking about, I think everyone has the ability to be the most powerful genius in the world, based on the example of Jesus, on how Jesus lived by a code of love, even when everyone was against, or not everyone, but when a lot of people were against him, hating on him, trying to kill him, killing him, doing all the things they did to him, to continue to be filled with love in your heart under whatever's happening right now. Me Too culture, cancel culture, just the divisiveness of politics and family dynamics in the world, all these different things, to continue to be led by love in your soul and in your heart and your being, even when people are making you wrong, even when people are judging you, when they're calling you bad names, when think you should be taking other actions that you're not taking, when they're trying to pull you down, whatever they're trying to do, you being led by love and not anger and frustration, that is genius, because that was the example. And I think it's probably one of the hardest things for people to do. It's easy to get defensive, be angry, reactive, be divisive with other people. It's really hard to stay loving yourself fully and loving others even when they're trying to beat you down. That is one of the greatest examples, I think, is being love at all times. It's really hard to do, but that's genius in my mind.
I love that. Love is the highest frequency.
Yes.
And that's the best way to end this conversation.
Appreciate
Louis,
you.
thank you so much. And I just can't wait to see how the genius Louis House continues to make the world a better place.
Appreciate it.
Love you.
Thank you. Love you too, man. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for joining me today on the Genius of Podcast. What an incredible conversation with Louis House. I want to encourage you to pick up one of his books, or maybe both of them. He has The School of Greatness and The Mask of Masculinity. And if you've not yet gone to his podcast, check out the School of Greatness podcast. It will blow your mind. By the way, today is the launch of my new book, The Genius of Jesus, The Man Who Changed Everything. So if you haven't already done it, make sure you go to a local bookstore, pick up the book, or go online and pick it up there, or go to thegeniusof.com and join us for everything that we're doing here. I want to encourage you to subscribe to the Genius of Podcast on Apple Podcasts and leave a review. And if you join me on YouTube, make sure you leave a comment and share with us future guest recommendations. I want to thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you on our next episode of The Genius of.